Surviving lockdown.
Is this really happening to us?
Disbelief.
It couldn't happen here, could it? And if it did, surely the NHS would save us. I mean, despite its issues, it is one of the most advanced healthcare systems in the world.
A year into the pandemic, I often wake up in the morning and think for like a split second, what a nightmare that was. And then it dawns on me that this is real, this sense of being frightened. It overwhelms me. The sensation has been ever present, just like a horrific Groundhog Day. One problem early on was I was like a sponge. I was soaking up all the news on all channels, on mainstream news and social media, and it was overwhelming. And then I stopped. I put the news to one side and I tried to ignore it.
The sense of being frightened was magnified when I found out that if I became ill, my life wouldn't be worth saving because of the so-called nice guidance for fragile patients. But that fear turned into anger. Anger. I felt as if I and all disabled people had suddenly become society's burden. There it was, in black and white. We'd been thrown under a bus.
I mean, who had the right to say that life wasn't worth saving, wasn't worth living? My life might seem difficult to some, but it's the only one I've got. The anger doesn't end.
And there have been so many things over the last year that I have been angry about. The daily press conferences.
Hands!
Face!
Space.
The vindictive communication on social media. #sheeple.
I mean, not being able to see my friends and family.
And not being able to celebrate the usual things that we do together.
I guess most of us have been born out of frustration that something so microscopic, an unseen enemy, has stolen my life. I feel like I've let myself go, and I've become lazy. There have been occasions when I've woken up and looked in the mirror and I didn't recognise myself. Normally I'm clean shaven, smartly dressed, reasonably, and I'm smiling. But I feel like I'm the opposite to this.
Nostalgic.
In lots of ways, nostalgia has brought about some escapism, like watching classic Emmerdale for... Alright, come on, don't laugh. It's taken me back to a time in my life when things were like simple.
I mean, music has taken me back. Music streaming has been invaluable, feeding a whole host of emotions.
I wanna live. I really survive.
John Lennon! I never met yet a Prime Minister or President Connor Jr.
Although I'm hanging on to the Lighthouse Family's lyrics, it's not the end. We're gonna live again. I'll be with you again. We're gonna live again. December 31st, 2019, 4:30 p.m.
I'm standing on the beach at Constanta, capturing the final sunset. Closure on yet another turbulent year. I had received a phone call from my brother asking me what I was doing for New Year's Eve. We talked about the loss of our mother, our fourth family bereavement in 4 years. We had previously lost our father, younger brother, and my mum's last remaining sister. He said, "It cannot get any worse for us." 2020 started as best it could.
March 23rd, 2020, and Boris Johnson announces a total lockdown for 4 weeks.
To some, it felt like the end of the world. But for me, it felt like an opportunity. I needed a rest, a break, and time to reflect over the last 4 years. It all appeared well until Black Friday, as I call it, when I went out in the morning to do my weekly shop and discovered that all the shelves were bare. I literally walked from one store to the next, finally covering every single food outlet in Wisbech. And by the time I entered the final store, I didn't even bother to pick up a basket. The lack of cars in the car park and the fact there were only 2 others in the store at the same time as me at 12:30 on a Friday told its own story. The shelves were bare, the fridges were empty. It resembled where locusts had ravaged every store and through sheer greed had taken everything.
March 23rd, 2020, and Boris Johnson announces a total lockdown for 4 weeks.
To some it felt like the end of the world, but to me it felt like an opportunity. The warm weather gave me the opportunity to go on long walks and enjoy the nature around us. The only person I now needed to care for was myself. To walk 19 miles was my own personal record prior going into 2020. It was a challenge to beat, and what I soon came to realise was that I had nothing to go home to. The weather was amazing, and I was deafened by the eerie silences around me. I was seeing something quite different, and something refreshing. I was all alone, no traffic, no other walkers, just me lost in my own world with music in my ears, and the only other sounds being nature and my own footsteps. Soon I was walking 20 miles, 25 miles, 30 and more, finally walking 35 miles in one day. I made it a personal challenge to myself. I was abiding by the rules set out by our government, which allowed 1 period of exercise. What they did not say at the time was how long that period could be, so for me 11 hours was well within the rules.
However, by the end of April, lockdown was coming to its end.
And it was becoming clear that this was going to last a bit longer than first expected.
By now, I was ready to return to work, but the country was not, and I was starting to suffer and grow tired of my own company. If anything, I wished for someone to contact me, but there were no messages, no voicemails, no emails, no family apart from my elder brother. The novelty of lockdown was slowly wearing off. I needed something else, and lo and behold, I found it, while having one of my many chats with my family members laying rest in Luton, Lincolnshire. It dawned on me to clean and restore these old gravestones from our elder family members, some of which were barely visible and are over 80 years of dirt. If you ask for inspiration, it will find you. I bought a few items costing no more than £5 and set off on on a hot sunny morning, hoping to change the past and bring it back into the present. And what a better place to be, literally surrounded by family, chatting away about old times while baking under the midday sun and spending hour after hour cleaning headstones. I didn't feel lonely anymore. I felt like I had a purpose, and spending 5 hours or more on a gravestone and admiring your work despite the cuts and blisters and restoring it to its former glory, which is how it should never be, how it should always be and never be again. It's like taking a sad song and making it better. Music cue.
For me, the past year of lockdowns hasn't brought with it a sense of being shut in or isolated in the more talked about sense. It's brought about a huge learning curve and dramatic change both professionally and personally. Throughout my adult life, friends, family and work colleagues have always told me to slow down or it will catch up with you. And I've smirked as I've agreed a further 20 or more commitments. I've always been a busy person, but the pandemic brought a new level of busyness with what sometimes felt like overwhelming changes. I'm always surrounded by people, but during the pandemic I experienced loneliness like never before. Reminding me of a quote, something like, standing screaming in a crowded room with no one hearing at times. I prided myself on being that strong, independent woman, helper of others, fixer of problems, a businesswoman keeping a small, relatively new, non-profit community organisation afloat during unprecedented times. I supported as many members of the community as possible while making sure to pay the bills, the staff, and ensure the animals were fed. Managing these uncertainties whilst keeping on, and making sure that myself and my children were happy, safe, and healthy, steering through, over and around personal obstacles, while every cell in my body daydreamed of curling up in a darkened room. Trying to empower and infuse those around you when you don't feel very empowered or infused is not easy. I reached 36 years of age without realising that while I had been doing my best to support and protect those around me, there were many who wanted me to allow them to support and protect me.
Asking for help, accepting help.
We're all worthy of help, and saying no is okay. You may not receive the help where you expected it, but you'll be surprised at how much there is. I hear talk of vaccines, warmer months.
The pandemic hit while I was a third-year student nurse. I was so close to finishing. I'd heard about COVID-19 on the news, but I didn't think it would become a worldwide problem. During my studies with coronavirus spreading, my university went into lockdown. How will I be able to do my exams? Will I qualify? But then we went on to online
learning.
Sitting at home with a cup of tea in hand to keep me going. But as the pandemic got worse, it was put to us third-year students to either opt in and help the NHS out during this pandemic, or opt out and attend our final placement when accessible. Since starting my nursing degree, all I've ever wanted to do was qualify as a registered nurse. So this was a hard decision for me. I decided to opt in. I made this decision by listening to my gut, and my gut was wrong. Third-year students started caring for patients in the hospital as if we were band for pre-reg nurses. Just as I was starting my first week of shift patterns, the Thursday 8 PM clap started, which I heard about through Facebook. I sat waiting until 7:50 and then decided to grab a blanket and sit in front of my front door. Cup of tea and hand, of course. 8 PM hits, and suddenly I heard someone clap from a distance. And then another, and then another. And I decided to join in. And then we came the cheers and the sirens. Very mild from a distance, but definitely hearable. I was overwhelmed with pride. And I became very emotional. The recognition was real. And people were starting to appreciate key workers and everyone else keeping the country going through this pandemic, especially the NHS. I knew what I had done was right, and I joined in every Thursday to clap. So, while everyone else was in lockdown, staying at home and keeping safe, I was working 12-hour full-time shifts, days and nights. This was tiring and demanding. And I'd often get home feeling that tired, I would just skip dinner, get myself cleaned up and ready for the next day's 12-hour shift. The pandemic was getting scarier, and the daily toll of people dying from this virus was on the rise. Every patient who recovered and was allowed home would always bring hope to us all. I offered to take a patient who recovered from the virus out of the hospital and await a lift from their family members. We set off. I pushed the patient in the wheelchair, both with our masks on. Staff members started to clap while we left. Only a few, but enough to make the patient feel great. As we got to the entrance, I saw the family members waving, standing beside their car. I started walking over, and then they started clapping too, with tears in their eyes and smiles behind the masks. They were happy to be getting their much-loved relative home. They thanked me for everything I had done. And I thought to myself, I didn't do anything. I just escorted the patient out. But the appreciation was there. The pressure was real in the second lockdown. And with Christmas coming up, my family is everything during the season. But then straight after Christmas, we're back into another lockdown. Family is important, and it's nice to be able to see them, especially when you work with long hours and you get to have one every day off. But it just wasn't possible. So I kept myself busy at home, managed to find a job to do, with a cup of tea or two, of course. The pandemic has hit the world with force, and so many people have lost their lives due to the coronavirus. My friends and family have been my rocks, and they continue to check up on me to see how I'm doing. People have become more friendly to us NHS staff, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Being in lockdown has given me the time to be at home, even if I spend a day watching Netflix in pyjamas, drinking a cup of tea. The biggest thing I've taken from this whole experience is to live for now. Enjoy the smallest moments, because it's true what they say after all. You only live once, so live every day.
Lockdown has been by far one of the most stressful times for myself, my partner and my 2 children. We desperately wanted to move to a bigger house to give us more security for our children and to build our dream home together. Looking at the houses on the internet, one finally caught our attention, and it was perfectly located for us. Our hearts were set on viewing this property. The pictures we'd seen were amazing, and to have the opportunity to view the property excited us. We literally couldn't wait. The day we came to view it was a sunny day, which had put a bigger smile on our faces. So we met the estate agent outside, and as soon as he took us through the front door, the feeling was just
wow.
The kitchen was everything I could have dreamed about, like the ones you see in posh magazines. Modern appliances already fitted, plenty of space, and each room matched up to our expectations. This really did feel like our dream home. But we decided to hold back, as we had other houses to view later in the week. However, none of them gave us that wow feeling we'd previously experienced. Yes, we were set on this house. It was perfect.
I wanna live, not only survive.
So, we put in an offer, and thankfully it was accepted. So, we put our current house up for sale. Surprisingly, it didn't take long before our house was made an offer and we decided to accept. Things were finally looking up for us. We were planning our future together, and in our new family home, it felt like a new home was in the palm of our hands, and nothing could go wrong.
Then the nation went into winter
lockdown.
Although my partner's job was secure, as he could work from home, alas, mine was not, as I work in a restaurant which had to close due to the COVID-19 regulations. Schools and nurseries closed, so our children were at home, and I needed to be home for them. By now, my job was uncertain, and I was put on the furlough scheme. And then the bank, which had previously given us a loan, had now reversed that decision, as my employment status was now classed as vulnerable. And to add insult to injury, all they were prepared to offer me now was a loan of £1 solitary. It was not my fault that we were now in a situation forced upon us by this pandemic. We were heartbroken, and just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, the prospective buyers of our home pulled out. We were back to square one. We still had the intention to move, so we were still looking at properties on the internet. By now we were looking at a cheaper alternative. But we still had the ambition to turn it into our dream home. Over the weeks and months, we looked at many properties. But none were suitable, let alone able to give us that
Wow.
feeling again. I was beginning to feel that it would never happen. I gained part-time employment with one of the major supermarket chains. At least I was earning a wage, so the uncertainty of returning to the restaurant was less of a stress to contend with. And now we finally found a new home, although it will never compare to our dream house. We've also successfully received a bid for our current home, so things are starting to look up again. And we're now looking forward to the process of finally moving into a new property. The lockdown restrictions have been the most stressful and heartbreaking period of my life. Our dream home was in the palm of our hands, and we lost our dreams due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Restoration. Lockdown gave me opportunities to enhance my skills in restoring old photographs to their former glory. To restore old photos using my knowledge, time and skills just by using a mobile phone not only brought me pleasure, but also gave me an opportunity to see my family connection to the past.
Selfish. There is no stronger image from last year than seeing an elderly gentleman, shopping list in one hand, looking around at empty shelves, knowing that greed had beaten him to his need.
Silence is not always golden, but sometimes it's deafening. The deafening silence stuck at home, the deafening silence out and about. I could hear nature undisturbed by the modern world.
Communication. Now I'm calling family members and talking to them more than at any other time I can previously remember. Mostly in this modern world, I would speak to people online via emails or messenger. It felt like going back to the good old days and picking up the phone and talking the night away.
Isolation. Living in a block of flats during lockdown felt like being isolated in full view. They could see me but couldn't come in. I could mouth words but they couldn't hear me. And there was no one out there to help you because everyone was experiencing the same thing. It's a bitterly cold winter's morning, March 2020. There's ice on all the cars in the street. Looking outside, it's the kind of day you just want to go back to bed. It's 10 minutes past 5 on the 20th of March, and I open my front door. It does stick a bit, and I was trying to be quiet as I couldn't wake up the whole house. The dog lay in his bed near the door and looked up to me as if to say, I am not going out there, before he snuggled right back into bed. It was dark outside, as the clocks had not changed, and there were no streetlights on. Out into the cold I went, with my scarf, hat, and gloves on. As I was late home the day before, I had not covered the car. The whole car was encased in a sheet of ice, and I managed, after a bit of pulling, to open the driver's door, and got into what was frankly an icebox. Then I got the car warm and sat in, knowing I would have to get out again to de-ice the car. The temperature was so low I could see my breath, and the car took ages to defrost. I've started my drive from Norfolk to Cambridge, a journey of about 1.5 hours. And I always listened to the radio on the way, and there were many fuel stations and retail parks along the way, including a busy McDonald's, and I arrived at my place of work at about 6:45. The day after, I heard the news that Boris Johnson was putting the whole country into lockdown. And if you could work from home, then you should. I was not able to work from home, so again, the next day I went out into my car. The journey this time was quicker, as I listened to the radio and everyone on it was talking about staying at home. I saw no other cars on the road. It was like a ghost town. I reflected on what the radio was saying, how this would affect people's lives. A month or so into the lockdown, I caught COVID-19, and I had 14 days off of work. During this time, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I could not go out to walk with my dog or go shopping. If the shopping was delivered, they had to drop it off by the front door and then leave. I sat watching TV all day. I reflected on what the country and the world was going through, and how this then affected me, and my family locked inside the house, and only going to the garden for fresh air. The feeling was like being in prison with nowhere to go. The time passed slowly, and all of the days seemed to merge into one.
It's 10 to 9 in the morning and time to take Alfie to nursery. So I put his little coat and his shoes on, book bag in hand, and conduct the usual check to see if he's put in anything that doesn't need to attend nursery with him. And yes, Peppa Pig is hiding in the bag. A quick takeout and through the front door we go. I put Alfie snugly in the car seat for the quick journey to the nursery. The drive to the nursery doesn't take long as there's not many cars on the road. Finding a space to park is easy along the road opposite the church. There are a few cars parked in front and the mums and dads are getting their children out of the cars. Alfie always has to say goodbye and give his granddad a kiss, otherwise he gets upset. Out of the car and it's a short walk to the gates, and I don't have to dodge the usual overload of mums. With my mask on, we approach the gate and it's 8:59. A few mums are ahead of me, standing 2 meters apart from one another. But no chatting, no children running around laughing, excited to start their first day at school. The gate opens and the teacher greets each child by taking their temperature. No parent is allowed into the school to make sure that their child is settled, so it's a quick kiss and goodbye and they're in. I go back to the car and there's no rushing of parents panicking about getting to work on time. The quietness of the street and absence of hustle and bustle of many parents has become normal since lockdown. The journey to school and back again takes at most 15 minutes, and unlike the usual 20 or 30. Back in the warm to coffee and TV to keep us entertained until it's time to collect Alfie at noon.
Not only do we take people for granted, I think the same can be said for places. One of those places for me is Hunstanton. I've been shielded since March 2020, except for a brief excursion to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn. I was missing getting out and about, and when lockdown rules were loosened in the summer of August, we were told there was no longer a need to shield. But then, there was a dilemma. Just because we could go out a bit more, should we? The anxiety was still there. It took me weeks to build up the confidence to go for it. In my head, the planning for it was akin to making arrangements for an expedition to find the source of the Nile, rather than a 25-minute car journey up the road to a place I visited 100 times before. The day arrived, but a bit like kicking a can down the street, I kept moving the time to leave. 12 noon came. Ooh, let's have some lunch first, shall we? Then 2:30, it was like, ooh, let's have a brew. And then finally, 4 o'clock, is it even worth going now? The answer back was very clear.
Yes, we are. And we're leaving now.
The answer from my wife. We loaded up the car and off we headed. We arrived and parked at our normal space.
What do we do now?
Go home? The words came to my head. But I persevered and got out of the car and into the wheelchair. I've never felt so small. In the dim and distant days of when I could stand, I was 6 foot. Now I'm about half that in my chair. It makes you feel incredibly vulnerable. The sea was a fantastic sight, despite the tide being out. And then there was the smells I missed so much. The sea itself, overlaid by fish and chips, donuts, candy floss, and the fishmonger. The only thing missing was the diesel fumes from the wash monster. We wandered along the prom until we reached the famous striped cliffs of Old Hunstanton. The aroma of fish and chips was just too much. We went into the nearest vendor, and there we sat on the prom, watching the cloud-cloaked sunset, with the tide coming in and beginning to crash against the sea wall. We savoured every mouthful of our fish and chips. We wouldn't have swapped that meal for the finest cuisine from anywhere in the world. It was a lovely evening and a calming experience. Haven't been back since.
I woke up one morning and put the news on the television to see that lockdown was easing. As I had not left the house in months, I was feeling trapped. So I thought I would get out and go shopping with my wife and help her, as it was food shopping day. We decided to use our local supermarket in town across the river. We arranged a taxi to take us there. I checked that I had my mask exemption lanyard and popped it on. Once we arrived, we entered the shop and grabbed what we needed while looking after my young nephew. Everything was fine. I felt okay, and I was glad to have got out of the house. After we finished shopping, we rang for the taxi to take us home. The taxi arrived, and we loaded the shopping into the car. All got in, and we all fastened our seatbelts, and as we exited the supermarket car park and approached Freedom Bridge across the river, the taxi driver slammed on his brakes. And I thought to myself, what the hell is going on? As I looked up, I could see his eyes glaring at me in the interior mirror. His head turned over to me over his shoulder, and in a stern, angry manner, he asked,
"Where's your mask?"
I'm exempt from wearing one.
"Not in my car, you ain't. You will put that on."
My blood was boiling, and I could not get into words to vent my anger due to the fact that my young nephew was here. And I was just distraught. As we turned into the road where we live and pulled up on the drive, all I could feel was rage about the way I had been mistreated. But at the same time, I was still trying to compose. And the taxi driver turned to my wife and said,
"That was £6.
when usually the fare was only £4.
Why so much this time?
The fare is £4, and the mask gave to us was £2.
We didn't know what to say, as my wife pulled out the coins from her purse and we unloaded the shop. That day, I had raised my courage to leave the house and to try and take on a normal daily task, just to then find myself in conflict with a taxi driver. Since this incident, I have barely left the house. It has knocked my confidence and my belief if the exemption card is even worth the paper it's printed on. Fear. Am I going to catch the virus? If I do, will I be okay? Are my friends and family safe? How are they coping? Have they had to give up work? Will there be an end to it all?
Invisible. A deadly, invisible virus has spread around the world. This huge pandemic that has brought us into lockdown. You can't see it, but you can see the effects of it. Keep washing your hands, sanitising your hands. erasing the invisible virus.
Selfishness.
The shelves were empty due to panic buying. Selfish people were buying everything up and not thinking of the elderly and vulnerable, despite us all being in the same situation. They just put themselves first.
Challenging. Each day became the same as the one before. Finding something to do, keeping busy, activating your mind. I found some challenging activities to do with my 2-year-old grandson. Making things from recycled toilet rolls, milk bottle tops, paper plates, colouring and drawing, and it was all very challenging. But so much fun and rewarding.
Loneliness. Staying at home every day and only going out to the school runs. Unable to see in person your family and friends. No hugs, no kisses, just a kiss blown at a screen of a laptop or a phone. Sitting in your own home, snuggled up on your sofa with your spouse can also feel lonely. Everyday conversations are fewer because there's nothing much to say. The feeling of being together, but also the feeling of being alone.
Before anyone had ever heard the word coronavirus, I would go on long solo walks to soak up the sun, capture my surroundings and refresh my mind. But after we went into lockdown, I had a new purpose: to escape the TV. Previously, the most I had ever walked in one day was 19 miles. This time around, I had nothing to come home to. I was walking to escape reality, walking to escape bad news, walking to keep my sanity. Thankfully, the weather was on my side. Warm spring days, music in my ears, and no traffic to dodge. With that music in my ears, a mobile phone to capture the moment, I gave myself something to do when the world around us was shutting down, staying at home and going into isolation. Taking advantage of our one period of exercise, I used it to the extreme, pushing myself further and further to escape the world that had shut down. I was now in my own world, many hundreds of thoughts passing through my mind when walking, good ones, bad ones. I was just trying to make a sense of everything, trying to soothe the pain and leave all the anguish in my soul out on the roads, and to not bring it home with me. Lockdown brings silence. It's a silence you've never quite heard before. No traffic brings new photographic opportunity. They were never possible before. Lockdown means I have no time limits on how long I can spend outside walking. It's the first time that I've ever actually felt free. And when you walk, you see things you can't when driving. You can see nature, you can smell nature, you can feel it around you. Birds chirping all day long that are no longer drowned out by a passing car. And you can smell the flowers at the roadside and are able to soak in the scenery. You're able to take the time to enjoy it. The music in your ears can make you happy. It can make you sad. It can remind me of the good times, and it can remind me of the ones who are no longer with us. But what I was able to achieve was that I gave something to myself to do whilst the world was stuck at home. It gave me something to show online whilst others sat in their homes. It gave me a purpose, something to appreciate that not everything is bad. It's how you deal with each situation, and I was able to put a positive spin on everything. It's for me a journey to wherever, just to see how long it takes. I have no idea where I'm going, but I know I will when I get there.
Since the summer, we've been debating as a family if we needed to get ourselves a dog. After weighing up the pros and cons, we decided that we should go for it!
Yeah! I love dogs!
We started looking locally at rehoming centres. Then, further afield, it wasn't as straightforward as before. We believed it would be easy. It was not. Then we spoke to a friend who works for a local charity which rehomes dogs from Romania. After a bit of searching, they found Comet. He had been offered to others, but nobody had wanted him. Should we take him? In Romania, the approach out of necessity for stray dogs is brutal. Capture, hold for about 14 days, and then kill. Comet was born on the streets and lived there for about 6 months before being captured. We don't know how close he was to being put down. All we know is he was removed from the kill shelter at the time. We'd thought long and hard about whether we should adopt him, and we have decided that we would!
Hey!
Then photos came through, and yes, we had made the right choice. He looked a right character. Comet was coming home!
Comet's coming!
He'll be with us in a couple of weeks. There was a period of quiet, and then we got the date. He would be with us on the 6th of December. Direct from Romania, a 27-hour road trip. We got a message he was on the way. Over the course of the next day, he would travel through Hungary, Austria, Germany, Belgium and France. With each border check, there was a possibility he could be turned back. He landed at Dover at 5 p.m. and he arrived with us at 8:30 p.m. He ran straight into the house and launched himself on the sofa. It was the first time he had ever been in a house. Despite all he had been through, he was remarkably trusting. For the first 2 weeks, we were advised not to take him on walks, as he was a bit of a flight risk. We then started walking him, going a bit further each day. A limp became quite obvious. We took him to the vets. It was an historic, untreated broken leg. There are certainly challenges ahead, but he has given us a focus, something to get up for. The question is, have we saved him or has he saved us?
I worry about going back to the outside world. When lockdown restrictions have been eased, everybody has been inside their homes for many months, working from home, not seeing their family and friends, following government rules. Once lockdown eases and we can venture out to more places, go shopping in shops that had to close, we can see our family and friends again, but will things be normal? Will everyone still wear a mask, keep to social distancing, sanitise their hands from shop to shop? There is the constant worry that this deadly COVID-19 is still out there silently infecting the nation. As I write this, there's a very deadly variant spreading across India and reports of many daily deaths still happening. This intense virus has made its way to England, so once again, are we safe to come out of lockdown? I don't know. We've had our first vaccination and many others have had a second dose, but it still doesn't mean you're safe and you can go back to your normal way of living. During lockdown last year, my mother-in-law passed away. It was in July and we were restricted to 30 people at the funeral. Many people couldn't attend. Now in April, my father-in-law passed away, just 9 months after his wife. We are organising yet another funeral for only 30 people. But we are expecting an announcement by Boris Johnson on May the 17th. Will this change? Can more family and friends attend? Funerals shouldn't just be by invitation only. It's the only and last time you get to say goodbye. I just hope this changes, as it feels so unfair. My 50th birthday is soon approaching, and so I just want to have a big celebration with my family and friends, but this will not happen. Restaurants and pubs have started to reopen, so do I just have a family meal, socially distancing, or do I celebrate at home and feel safe? I just hope that this easing of lockdown restrictions remains safe. Everybody still abides by the rules, and there is not another outbreak of people needing to be hospitalised. Our NHS nurses and doctors have been a huge credit during the COVID-19, my daughter being one of them. It's put a huge strain on them, and we can't thank them enough. I, for one, will be keeping safe, and so will my family.
Surviving lockdown.
Is this really happening to us?
It couldn't happen here, could it?